If reality of this physical world is similar to dream, then it follows that all people sitting next to me are lifeless character acting like conscious people. Is this right? First of all, I didn't say that the dream is exactly like wakeful state. It's not. The laws governing the dream state are different than the laws governing the wakeful state. In the dream state, you can be in Montreal 1 second, next second you're in Toronto, third second you're in Vancouver. It look absolutely normal. Nobody has ever questioned how did it suddenly travel. If this happens here, you'll be freaking out. Therefore, the rules are very different. In the dream state, you can fall from a building and not get hurt. You can't fall from a building in the physical state and not get hurt. There's so many rules that are totally different in a dream state and in a wakeful state. Each state has its own reality. When you are in a dream state, while you're dreaming, the dream is real. In spite of the fact that the laws of that dream state are totally different from the laws of the physical wakeful state, you still take them as real and don't question them. When you wake up, you discover it was a dream, not real, and therefore you don't care. This is a built-in system in us that we don't care. How is this built-in? We forget the dream within 30 seconds. Most dreams are forgotten in the first 15 seconds. They get erased as you wake up. Most people say, we never dream. Everybody dreams several times every night. There's nobody that never dreams. There was a special session when I first came to United States on study of sleep and dreams. And I joined that course. And we used to have the subjects go to sleep with monitors, cameras, seeing the rapid eye movement. Because when you are dreaming, the eyes move. And even on the closed eyes, you can see that the eye is moving, and it shows on the eyelid also. This is recognized for a long time that rapid eye movement takes place when you are dreaming. REM, they call it for short. So REM is a known phenomenon in dreaming. So when a person was sleeping and had REM, the camera showed that the eye is moving, we would wake him up and ask him, what are you watching? He would tell us what he's watching. Every time he was able to tell what the dream was, without fail. On the other hand, in fact, the nature of that movement also indicated what kind of dream he was having. For example, one man's eyelid was moving in vertical directions. Woke him up. What were you seeing? I was seeing a waterfall. The direction of the waterfall, where his inner eye was looking up and down, was also being reflected on the physical eye. Another person was sleeping and his eyes were moving left and right, horizontally. You woke him up, what were you seeing? I was seeing a tennis match. So you could see that the eyes, while dreaming, are moving in different directions depending upon the nature of the dream and the scene that you are watching in the dream. Also, we found that every person dreams after every half an hour or so. And no dream lasts more than 12 minutes. And the average dream is 7 minutes. All these studies have been done several times. So we all dream every night. But we forget so much that those people who said we were watching these things, when they woke up finally, they said we never had a dream. They did not remember at all. Whereas what they said was recorded. So it was played back to them. Then they said, oh yeah, I think I did. When you play back their own voice telling us what the dream was, then they begin to recall. Otherwise, they're forgotten. So the real nature, why we forget our dreams is that we realize it was a dream. Same realization can come if we move from this state into a total wakeful state of the next level. This will disappear. But many of us will be there. We see people in the dream, and when we wake up, they are also there in living life, but they did not participate in our dream. The dreamer was only one. People appeared in the dream who might have been real in physical world. They appeared in the dream in one person's dream. Similarly, here when we wake up to higher reality, it's one person's dream sees everybody else. When we go to still higher reality, If you wake up 5, 6 times, from dream within dream, you come to the oneness and you dream of the one. So that means all creation can be called God's dreams at different levels. It's the Creator's dreams, and we are participating. How do we know this? Because the dreamer is sitting inside the character. You will notice when you dream at night, the person who is in the character, moving around, is the same person that is dreaming, not a different one. The self never changes. The same self will be there in every dream and will never change. Similarly, self will never change at a higher reality. Self will not even change till the top. The self is the reality. And you always feel the self, no matter what level of consciousness you are. So therefore, when we say, if this is a dream, this is not a dream. We are awake at physical level. If we were in a dream, then we would talk very differently, which we do very rapidly, scenes changing very rapidly. And we have all had dreams, and we meet friends in our dreams, and they are very different. At the astral plane, when we discover this is a created thing, it doesn't mean that the people are not there. They are awake there. But they participated in our dream. Did all of them participate? No. When you have a dream at night, some people you recognize because they are your friends or you have met them. Some people are strangers in a dream. When you wake up, they don't exist. They were only there for the dream. Same thing here. When we wake up to a higher reality, we find that many of the friends that we knew are there. But some people are strangers, they disappear. This disappearance of people that we know continues till only one remains and there is nobody. When you have a perfect living master guiding you, who has accepted to take you to a true home, you will find him always there at every level. When you wake up, he's still there. You wake up to any level, he's still there. At the end, he and you are the same. It's only one. Therefore, in fact, the perfect living master we see here as a different body is your own true self. Own true self being projected as a different person. So this is a very beautifully arranged system by which we create the many and they all look real. We do not create dreams, we create realities. What is reality? What is the definition we have of reality? Our definition is that we can check it by sense perceptions. I want to know, is the table real? Touch it. Yeah, I can touch it. I can see it. Therefore, it's real. Is this cup of water real? Is the cup real? Is the water real? I'll take a sip of it. Tastes good. Real, cool. Therefore, it's real. I just tested by 3 of my sense perceptions. No other proof exists of reality except our sense perceptions. Now, these sense perceptions work at 3 levels. Supposing we have a dream, we are sleeping. In the sleeping also, I feel I'm talking to you and there's a cup of water there. And I want to test, is it real or not? And people in the dream say, it is real, check it out. So I'll pick up the cup of water, taste it exactly like I did now, and I'll say it's real. The taste of water is real. When I'll wake up, cup is not real, water is not real, taste of water is real, my touching the cup is real, I can remember it. Sense perceptions are real, but the objects that we associate with sense perceptions are not. There is a statement that this world is Maya in Indian languages, which people have translated Maya as illusion, which is not a correct translation. Because illusion means unreal. But nothing is unreal. And during dream, they are real. When we wake up, they become unreal. So that is why you can't really call it illusion. Why they call it illusion is because the experience is real. Remember, experience is always real, no matter where. Even a dream experience is a real experience, you are having it. You can't deny that you had an experience. Experience is always real at every level. But the objects we associate with those experiences disappear when we wake up to a higher level. The objects are not real. Experience is real because experience is creating the objects. And that this knowledge comes up when you go to 2 steps higher. You can know exactly how this projection takes place, how you have something in yourself, an experience built in, and it's projected outside. This is a very interesting thing to go to the astral causal plane and see how destinies are made. We are all living in a destiny. We are born in a particular place, born in a particular kind of body. We have parents not chosen by us, but by destiny. We live our life according to our destiny. And we divide destiny into 3 parts. The law of karma, which is recording destiny, says there are 3 types of karma, 3 types of destinies. 1, we are born with. We don't take a decision where we are born, where we get educated, where the parents are, where they take us around when we are little, where we get all the upbringing. It's not in our hands. When we grow up, we look for jobs, we look for work, and we can't decide where to go. We meet people. We don't know, we can't meet all the people. Only a small section comes up, and we like somebody, we dislike somebody. All these things are obviously pre-written because we have no choice. The whole life is like that. When we die, we don't know where we will die. And when we will die, all this is called pralabdha. Pralabdha means a fate with which we are born. It's already, all the events of fate are predetermined and pre-written at which time they will occur. And we go through them accordingly. But in between these, there are gaps when we make decisions. Gaps are where we have more than one choice to make. Should we go right or wrong? Should I go tomorrow or day after? Should I eat this or not eat this? Should I go to that meeting or not go to the meeting? These are the moments when we are making a new choice or looks like a new choice. And therefore, when it looks like a new choice, our brain and our mind functions and deliberates and makes a choice. Now, this was in our control. At least we feel this is in our control to make a choice. So this is a different kind of destiny, as if we are creating a new destiny with our decision making. So this is called Kariman, or new actions, new intentions creating a new destiny. We do this all the time. It is not necessary to act upon this intention. We can have an intention. I don't like that person. I want to hit him, but I really don't hit him. But we made a decision already to hit him. So even if you think of it, you have created a new destiny, new karma. So this new karma, or the new action that become destiny, are being created in our head all the time. In one lifetime, we create so much of this. It can't be paid off or taken or cared for or accounted for in one more lifetime. What we have been doing is to create so much of karma that it cannot be taken care of in one life. We cannot pay it off. We cannot be rewarded for good deeds in one life. Therefore, it accumulates. It accumulates in a reservoir. A reservoir not somewhere else in our own mind. There's a reservoir in our mind which holds these decisions we have made, but which were not acted upon in the one life or 2 lives. They may come up after 100 lives. So these decisions that are held in reservoir are called Sinchit karma or reserve karma. So we all have decisions we have made which are held in reserve. So when we have a new life, if we are following normal life and we don't have any spiritual inclination and we don't have any spiritual teacher of ours, the normal thing is that when we die, we are accosted by some beings who in the astral plane, disembodied, they don't have bodies like us, and they are called angels of death. They are called Jamdut, they can be called by many names, and they bring us to one authority, which is also a soul like ours. By certain kinds of actions, good actions, is taken that position in the astral plane. And that authority then makes us see our whole life. This is just while we are dying, whole life backwards. from the point of death backward to the point of birth, and we see all the things that we did. And therefore, a decision is then made what can be accommodated in the next life. And a decision is made then. It starts with the best and the worst, which means the first thing that we can have, if we have done very good deeds, we can go to heaven. If we've done very bad deeds, we can go to hell. If a certain time is fixed, well, your bad deeds require you to spend 1 month in hell. These good deeds require you to spend 1 month in heaven. One does not cancel the other. That's the strange thing about this, that one does not cancel the other. In our Indian mythology, in our Indian scriptures, it is recorded that Lord Krishna, who was an avatar, incarnation of a god, Vishnu, the god of sustenance at the astral plane, who came as a human being here, and Krishna had a friend, childhood friend, named Udo. When they were children, Krishna had a lot of awareness of life and how it works. He is telling Udo, his young friend, that the law of karma cannot be easily understood. Because people think there is a scope for atonement. If you have done something bad, do good things to cancel the bad. It does not cancel the bad. So according to the story that's written there, they say that Krishna points to an ant crawling on the ground. And he says, Udo, this ant that you see crawling was once Brahma, the creator of this universe. And once he was Indra, the head of one of the big heavens. Because of his karma, he is now today an ant. It doesn't matter how good and how high he went, the bad could not be taken care of. There is no real atonement. So that is why it's the biggest trap possible. You do good deeds, you're not going anywhere, you just get reward. You do bad deeds, you're punished. The reward and punishment goes on forever. There is no way to get out of the system. That is why they say this law of karma, the way the destiny works in these 3 forms, is a permanent trap for us. We can't get out of it. So therefore, to get out of it, we have to have somebody who can pull us. Ultimately, the only way you can be pulled out is by the love of a perfect living master. Because the rest is all mind, all karma is in the mind. There is no karma on the body. There is no karma on sense perceptions. All karma is created and paid off in the mind. And that is why the mind has a very long life. This physical body, what life it has? Average life, say 100 years. Most people don't even live to 100. Some may live a little more than 100. What is the life of a astral self? The sense perceptions. Between 1,000 and 3,000 physical years. So you can imagine that your inner self, which can see, touch, taste, smell, has existed for a much longer time. And you can see, remember things. What is the life of a mind? 3 to 5 million years of physical time. That means we carry the same mind for millions of years. And that is why karma operates on the mind. If we change our mind, karma would not go with us. It'll end. But because the mind is the same, the thinking mind is exactly the same. It's a body, inner body, with a much longer life. Therefore, it carries on the destiny like this. So it's very interesting that the mind holds all these experiences, and we can have an experience in the 100th life based upon something we did long ago. So these are a very strong trap that we are in. There's no greater trap that I know of than the trap of being trapped on time, first of all on time itself, and then the events on time, arranged cause and effect, which is called law of karma, and then being given the opportunity to use free will, an opportunity where we make decisions. That creates the karma. There is no other life form in which we can create a karma except a human life. There is no other life form in which we can escape from this whole trap except human life. So human life is very unique. This is the trap and also the escape from the trap. Here, the law itself provides that we have free choice. We do not have free will. in other forms of life. They're all going by programmed instincts. Whether they are trees and plants, whether they're insects and birds, whether they're mammals or angels, they all are living according to a fixed program and they go according to the program. Only human beings at the physical level get this opportunity. I am going to make a decision, and therefore they have the experience of free will. Is the free will real or just an experience? A big question. People have asked me many times, if free will is not real, why are we suffering because of it? If God has made all the decisions, then why are we suffering? I remember I was a student at the university, and one colleague of mine, he discovered, because he was a very religious person, he had full faith in God. So he came to the conclusion, human being, a man or a woman, cannot have free will at all. Simple argument. The definition of God is He's omnipresent, He's everywhere, omnipotent, all power, and omniscient, knows everything. God knows everything. If a human being can take a decision that God doesn't know, then God is very inferior to a human being. And if He knows everything, He will also know what you're going to decide. If He knows in advance what you're going to decide, where is your free will then? Then you're following God's will. And you think it is your will because you're not aware of the will. Because you are ignorant of what is going to happen next, you think you have free will. So in that sense, he came to the conclusion we have no free will. So I called him to my apartment. I said, let's discuss this. It's a very interesting subject. So I played a little trick with him. I often told you about it. I arranged on a tray a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and an empty cup. So when he came, I said, I am glad to hear you found out we have no free will. I want you to know that I have arranged tea, coffee, or nothing. You choose, but don't use your free will, you don't have it. He said, you've destroyed my whole discovery just with a cup of coffee and tea. I said, I am going to demonstrate to you, you not only have free will, but you can't avoid it. Supposing you say, I don't want to decide, your free will. I want to take this, your free will. Just by putting alternatives before you, I prove to you that you have free will. You have to make some decision. Even not making a decision is your free will. So therefore, free will is a genuine, real experience when we are in a physical body. So that is why we are not aware that the free will we are using here is part of the totality's free will, but looks like individuated right at the human level. So therefore it follows this level. When the question comes up, if it is a universal will coming from the universe or from God or somewhere, why are we punished for bad things? Why are we rewarded for good things? What is the basis of that? The basis is, it's a play. It's a play set up by your own totality of consciousness. All levels have been created. When supposing you get a bad experience, a bad dream, and you wake up, what do you say? Thank God it was a dream. It was not real. Eventually, we'll all say, thank God the whole life was a dream. And therefore, it won't look what we are thinking of now. There was nothing real. It was a show set up. And the show had to be in different forms. Then the question comes up, if it is all a drama set up, and we are sometimes high, low, sometimes we suffer, sometimes we enjoy, why did we pick up the particular role we are in now? Could we pick up a better role? We could have been some kings or some presidents or something, or rich people. Why did we pick up this low role? The answer is given in an interesting book called The Canterbury Tales, written by Geoffrey Chaucer. A very important book in English literature, because that book changed the nature of drama forever, and new novels have all come up based upon that book. That book defined characters as characters and not merely as actors. An actor became a character for the first time in that book. Before that, there was once upon a king and a queen. Now they became a very generous king or a bad king. The character was added in that book because it's a story about 40, 50 pilgrims going to Canterbury for a pilgrimage. And on the way, they tell stories to each other just to while the time. They sing songs, they recite poems. And Chaucer, who is the author of the whole story, he says, I was also amongst them. So Chaucer becomes a character. The writer also becomes a character. And in the middle of the story, other pilgrims say, Chaucer, you are a great author, you are a great poet. Tell us some good poem. And he says, I don't know any poems. The author who's written all the poems in the book says, I don't know any poem. They don't know, we know you are a good poet. And he comes up with the worst doggerel rhyme in the whole book. And everybody criticizes him. Oh, we expected something better. The question is that Chaucer is the author. He could have taken any character he liked. How did he choose a character in which he himself is being attacked by his own creation? That story is also compared with Jesus Christ. He was one with his Father, the Creator, and crucified by his own creation. The same thing happened there. The answer is the same. When you are creating a show which is your show, you are everybody there. Therefore, you are all the characters. It doesn't matter which character you take. So how we have come to this show is, it's a drama with actors. We decided to put ourselves in the head of one character. It doesn't matter which one. Because the show is all of your own show. Everybody is the same as yourself. In reality, all are the same one. But when we come here, we become differentiated, and therefore you put yourself in one brain, and therefore you take up that character, and you act. Only mistake we make is that we forget that we have come to act and are sitting in one character. We think we are the character, and we forget the reality. And that's why we are in a trap here. If we discover the reality, how we have come into this particular character, it won't matter at all which character we take. All the characters are ourselves. It's very interesting. But true knowledge can answer all these questions completely to your satisfaction, that this is all a created universe. Experiences have been generated. They are all experiences which are real. And the objects appear because of those experiences which we think are real because of our experience. We have no way to test if an object is real or not except with the sense perceptions. Supposing we had no sense perception, the world will cease to exist instantly. Our entire knowledge of this world is based upon our sense perceptions. No matter whether we look through a telescope with our eyes or look through a microscope, whatever we are seeing is from our sense perceptions. And sense perceptions we can find later on do create the entire universe. It's a very big truth, but very difficult to understand till we go to higher level. You can't understand a dream is a dream till you wake up. Same thing is here. So laws of dreams, laws of the astral plane are different. In dream, time passes fast, no control. Here, time passes at a certain level. Who determines the time, how is it passing here in our daily life? The clock. Can you imagine? I could be sitting with my friends and chatting away and say, yeah, 15 minutes have gone, we should go and look at the watch, 2 hours have passed. Which is correct, 15 minutes or 2 hours? We'll accept 2 hours and not 15 minutes, those are our own experience. Therefore, we have taken the physical things far more seriously, as far greater reality than our own experiences. So experiences which are the reality are being put back, and the objects that are being created from experience are being taken more seriously. A great scientist, you have heard of his, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, in his last notes, writes a very interesting thing. 1 month before he died, in his last note, he writes that I have been working all the time on what we have observed and not taken into account the role of the observer. Why did he write that? because in his time we had found something called the quantum mechanics. Now, what is quantum mechanics? That they found that a wave can become a particle just by human observation. It's a very big thing. That a wave, like photons were used, light was used, that light was a wave. If you don't observe it, if you observe it or measure it, it becomes particles. So this is a very big thing. Even today, so many experiments have been done in science, and quantum physics, quantum mechanics stands that human observation changes energy into matter. They will soon come to the conclusion that the whole matter has been created. The whole energy looks like matter because of human observation. But within 1 month, Einstein died before he could follow up with this. Another great scientist has recently died, who people thought was as great as Einstein. His name was Stephen Hawking. You must have heard his name. Stephen Hawking gave last interview within less than a month of his dying. In that he says he has been trying to find out the origin of the universe. When did it start? When did the Big Bang come? 13.5, 13.6 billion years ago. And he says, what was before that? All his life he was trying to find where did it happen. And they could not determine, because the center from where it happened itself has spread out, and the whole universe is the center of the expanding universe. Very difficult question. In the last interview, he says, I have come to the conclusion that before physical time came, there was imaginary time. Very beautiful statement. And then he explains imaginary time. He says, imaginary time is if we are sitting with friends and 15 minutes looks like past, the clock says 2 hours. 2 hours is the physical time, 15 minutes is the imaginary time that pre-existed even the Big Bang. Very important statement. And absolutely correct. From metaphysical point of view, spiritual point of view, that's exactly what happens. The power of imagination is so strong. It generates all this. Here is a scientist saying that the imaginary time led to the creation of time in Big Bang. So it's very interesting how these different laws have been operating at different levels. So that is why in answering this question, such a long time I have taken. They will say the nature of time. Karma would not exist if there was no time. That is why time has been given a very nice name in Indian language. Hindi we call it Kal. Kal is time. A little translation of the word Kal is time. But we interpret Kal as a negative power which has trapped us, which is also true. Time has trapped us. Time is a precursor of all karma. If there was no time, there would be no karma. So time is a very big trap, and it is all the events placed on time that are creating a problem. If you study the nature of time, you can only do it at the causal plane. At the causal plane, and you will see time never flows. Time is static. All time has been created at once. Events have been placed on this time. And we are all time traveling. People say Egyptians could travel. We are traveling right now. 1 hour has passed. We have moved from 1 hour. And we are traveling on time from one event to another, from one picture to another. And therefore, time is static, and it is a very, very great trap. And if time were not there, we would be free. So the perfect living masters help us to go beyond mind where there is no time. And therefore, there is a reality which is forever. They say soul is immortal. It has to be immortal if there is no time. Time creates mortality. There is no time, it is immortal. Everything is infinite, immortal in a sense, because there is nothing to hold it back. These truths can only be found if you actually go into that state and see what your true self is. If you are in a spiritual state of the soul, all answers will come to you directly from experience. It's not somebody else is saying something or believing anything. Don't have to believe anything if you can have that internal experience. That is why I keep on reminding my friends, please go within. check it out. Before you discuss something, take one step and see what is there. You will have no more questions if you go within. So go within, have practice of going within. Not that difficult. We made it difficult just by having too much reliance on experience created outside. Desires of something that's experienced outside. Desire creates attachment. Attachment brings us back again and again. Too much attachment. And then people hear about it. Oh, I am going to practice detachment now. I have never seen anybody successful in practicing detachment. When you try to detach, you get more attached. When I came to the United States first time to study here in a university, I found a nice place called Ye Old Shakey's Pizza. I like the pizza. So I began to enjoy the pizza and I thought to myself, I am getting attached to this pizza. Let me get rid of it. So I would close my eyes. No more pizza, no more pizza. The more I said, the more pizzas came in front of me. There is no way to detach yourself by practice. Nobody's been able to do it. One speaker in India, New Delhi, he told the people, when people say don't lie, you will lie more. He says, when the don'ts come, you always do what is don't. It's in human nature. He gave an example to the people in the audience. He said, I'll give you an example. Close your eyes. Do not picture your mother there. Do not see a photo of your mother. Everybody saw. It's just proving how our mind works. If you deny something, detach from something, it comes even more. What is the solution? Solution is a new attachment. If you are attached to one, you get a new, better attachment, you forget detached from the old one. So always it is another attachment that creates detachment, not the practice of detachment. So how does it happen on a spiritual journey? It happens because the pull of love of a perfect living master at some point in our journey becomes so strong that we are occupied with that pull and we forget the others. Detachment comes naturally. Love pulls and that love becomes strong and it automatically detaches us. Nothing else can detach us like that. So this is different stages in which detachment can come. That is why we are trapped here, because of our attachment. And then we call attachment love. I love my children, I love my house, I love my car, I love everything outside of me. Why not love yourself? No, nobody wants a time to love himself. It's always loving something outside, created in a created universe. So this is not love. This is attachment. How do I know it's attachment? Because the words used are, I love this thing. The I is very strong. When you say I do that, the focus is on your mind. I is a word used to express your ego. Ego makes the mind strong. Every time you exercise your ego, the mind becomes strong. And when the mind is strong, the spirit hides behind it. The soul hides behind it. The mind takes over. So whenever we are using ego to that extent, the ego keeps the mind hidden, keeps the soul hidden behind itself. So that is why ego can be a problem. When we say, I love this, I love that, supposing a person says to another, I love you. The other person says, but I don't, I hate you. Then the first person says, I also hate you. Love is not that simple. Love is a very powerful effect on people. When love affects us, we forget ourselves. We forget our mind. The beloved, when you love somebody, the beloved occupies that space which the ego is now occupying. You think of the beloved, not of I. So this is a very different experience. So love is a very strong experience and cannot be matched with attachments which only are ego experiences. I've taken too long to answer this long question, but I covered many other things also.